Hey, Chris. Let's talk about the latest news, roundups, retail, crowdfunding, expansions, base games, ports, as well as everything else you need to know on the board game hobby style of things. Let's go straight into it. A little bit of everything this week, but first of note, if you missed it, my top 10 finally of 2022 went live last week. Go check that out. That being said, we also covered Mythic. We've covered Mythic now twice. I will try not to be covering it this video. When you've got stuff that big, it really just needs to be covered completely separately. But that's not to mention that we have other crowdfunding campaigns, projects, and companies that we need to talk about because, you know what? We got to shine some light on the dark side of crowdfunding as well. Keep these people accountable as much as possible. Anyway, that being said, what do you need to know? What is the new thing? What is the biggest news that's dropped in the last week? Well, it's coming. Dum bum 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 bum. Yeah, I mean, you know what? This is a weird pedigree. We haven't had a great track record necessarily completely, but FFG has announced that we are going to get Star Wars Unlimited. What does that mean? Well, fortunately, unfortunately, this is not the card game you are looking for. Because it's one, not cooperative. Two, it's competitive. Three, they might as well be raising the middle finger towards the consumer. They're not going LCG, folks. They're going collectible. It's going to be a collectible, competitive arena, casual, simple but super complex, easy to get into but super deep mechanically speaking. All of those hot words on the latest press release from FFG. Does it mean anything? Not really. What are we going to see? No one knows. They say you're going to see stuff from the comic books. You're going to see stuff from the movies, from the books, from everything. Well, there's a little bit of question with that too. Asterix? Is it going to be the old school stuff? Is it going to be from the Legends portion of things? Like, I was a kid, right? Like, I have all the Star Wars books. I read all of those as a kid. Are we going to see things like the Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy? Are we going to see some Mara Jade? Are we going to see some of the other Solo kids, right? Or are we just going to get the new stuff, the new licensed stuff, the Disney stuff? Which, I mean, not bad, but pales into comparison, especially with the lore that's been put out there from the comic books, the Dark Horse series, you know, just all of that stuff that could be out there. All of the lore of, you know, Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, Jedi Master, establishing all of that stuff is just so... the fact that they made that all non-canon. Anyway, what are you going to see? Well, at the same time saying, don't worry, we're going to have a bunch of alternative art that you can chase after too. Is it going to be just gameplay? Is it going to be non-gameplay? How exclusive is some of this stuff going to be? How rare is some of this stuff going to be? Are they going to go Lorcana, where they're dropping these random promos that people are already trying to sell for $10,000 on eBay? Like literally, that Mickey promo right now, if you look it up here, people are trying to sell it for $10,000. People have already sold it for a couple thousand each. That's insane. They're grading it. They're grading it like they do the old school Pokemon cards. This thing's been out for months. I don't know. I don't know where to go with this. FFG's history or their previous repertoire in the Star Wars realms of things. I'm looking at you, X-Wing. I'm looking at you, Armada. I'm looking at you, Destiny. Right? Things that met their end way too soon. As they say, I've got a bad feeling about this. And so should your wallet. Are you going to speculate? Are you going to buy the hype? People are buying the pre-orders for pre-orders right now on Lorcana. You think Star Wars is going to be any less rabid? No. But that's the biggest news that's dropped, and it's just going to be bigger and bigger and bigger as the hype builds up between now and 2024. So, and I say that as someone who had a bunch of the old Decipher, the original Decipher, the black border, not the white border. What else is dropped? Well, Terraforming Mars, First Games. We're getting a new Prelude expansion. Do you need a new Prelude expansion? That's really the question. If you look at Terraforming Mars, across the board, the number one recommended expansion to be included even in the base game potentially is Prelude. It addresses some of the criticisms of the base game in the first place, but is it actually going to be a must-have expansion? How different is it going to be than the first Prelude? Do you need both Preludes? It reminds me, you know, at least in conceptualization, Very similarly to the recently crowdfunded Wonderland's War expansion. I have certain expectations of what an expansion is. And when I think of Wonderland's War's recent expansion, it wasn't really an expansion. It was an alternative deck to be used in place of something in the base game already. It wasn't actually expanding anything. It didn't get any bigger. It didn't get any new mechanics. It didn't get any more new stuff that wasn't present. It was just swapping one in for out. And, you know, technically speaking, technically sometimes being the best truth, technical truths, it technically was an expansion. But I'm looking at that and going, when I want an expansion, right, I want this, not just, right? And so is Prelude going to do that? Is Prelude also going to jump the shark? I mean, several of the other expansions people aren't super high on in the first place, or aren't like, you need this expansion, you know, unless you're one of those sadists who includes all of the expansions in the first place. You know, people are picking and choosing once it gets past Prelude. And I know people weren't super happy with some of the big box stuff that came out towards the end of the crowdfunding, and especially the fact that they used crowdfunding. I think that was Stronghold, though. So take that for what you will. But that's new, coming in the near-ish future, maybe by the end of the year. The other thing that was just announced from Alderac is you're going to be getting a Cubitos expansion. And they did a little pun on the wordplay here. Fowl play. It's going to be a 5 to 6 player expansion, and that's the other issue that I kind of have with it. It's going to be adding new racers, new courses, just new everything, new roles, new boxes, new dynamics. But, you know, did you ever clamor to play this game with a 5 to 6 player count? Granted, this one probably plays a little bit better as a push your luck dice rolling style of race game. But if you're like me, I don't know. It was just something about Cubitos that I've sort of said, this is nice. And then I played it a couple times and said, okay, trade it. See you later. Will this, you know, reinvigorate my desire to recollect it? Maybe. But if I need the expansion, I have a lot of other stuff that I can play easier without expansions. Because you're going to have to buy the expansion and you're going to have to trade for the base. And so, you know what I'm saying. Does it change things? Does it get it to the table easier? Or, you know, what else is it adding? And that's the problem with expansions too, is sometimes you just don't need more. And so we're going to kind of see where they go with that. Similarly, in a completely opposite direction, we're going to talk about a new acquire here. It seems like every time I do one of these news videos now, we're talking about Steamforged. But Steamforged has acquired the rights to, and we're not talking about Blacklist in a bad way this time, Blacklist's previous IP, Alter Quest. The Sadler brothers did the whole, you know, dynamic system for Alter Quest, and then whatever the like Miami Vice one was that I always forget the name of, and then they also did it for Street Masters, sort of that battle system, and this was the fantasy version of it, and so Steamforged picked it up. But the question is going to be, where does it go from there? Is it going to be like where Mythic has dumped a bunch of their other properties to other companies, and those companies, you know, are just kind of picking them up and reprinting them because they've been good retail sellers? Is it going to be something that they're going to try to bring to crowdfunding again? You know, we're seeing Monster Hunter now. No clue what else they have in store for us. We saw Sea of Thieves as well that I've covered previously. We saw the Gears of War card game. So that tends to be more of their MO on that side. But are they trying to bolster just their retail as well? I mean, it's not a bad option. I've heard it's, you know, a little bit better than some of those other predecessors using the same game system. But I mean, we'll see where it ends up going overall from that standpoint. Speaking of expansions, we'll go back here for a second and we'll go on a slight tangent, but also slightly similar. If you are not following the upcoming GameFound project from Gale Force 9, the reprint of Firefly Outer Rim, or Firefly, as it's otherwise actually known, because several of the items that are associated with that, including some of the expansions, are out of print. They are doing a full reprint. And with the latest update, they said that there will not only be just the old stuff, there's actually going to be a new expansion to go along with that. This new expansion is going to be called the Restless Soul, sort of more of a deceptive ship and deceptive mechanics that are going to go along with it. New crews, capers, shuttles, and new supplies, nav cards, stories, and jobs to go along with it. So how do you feel about that? And I haven't seen like what this is going to be looking like and how much different it is. I I'm not a huge fan of the pick up and deliver mechanic in the first place, but I know that this IP holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts, especially from a nostalgia standpoint. You know, if you ever venture onto the internet, what series would you ever like to be restarted, or what series was the biggest one that ended too soon? I mean, Firefly is inevitably one of the top 2 or 3 choices every single time. And so the question is this aesthetic going to match the previous versions? Is it going to be a straight reprint? How much art or how much artistic change is going to be there? Is it going to be straight compatible? Do you have a difference with this expansion compared to the aesthetic of the originals? Just how cross-compatible is it going to be? I'm assuming completely, but, we just saw with Teotihuacan where, if you're going to buy all the new stuff's going to match, and maybe the old stuff isn't going to match along with it. And how big of an aesthetic pleaser is that for you? So take that for what you will, but we still don't have any crowdfunding launch date as well from them. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see what Gale Force 9 has in store. Now, again, we're going back to FFG because this is also what we got in the news. We have the latest pack announcement from Marvel Champions. We're getting Archangel. Unfortunately, it's not like the cool looking Archangel. It's the boring one, pre-apocalypse with the real wings instead of the steel wings. So, I mean, kind of cool, I guess. We kind of knew some of this was coming. Not surprising. But the real question is it going to play in? Are we going to see a transformation? Are we going to see what they can do in that aspect? That would be really kind of cool. All of a sudden, you get transformed into the Apocalypse's Horsemen of Death, right? Like, that would be something intriguing. Lastly, again, here, we have to talk about it. And we're going full circle here. I said I wasn't going to talk about Mythic, but we're going the other direction with another company. Grimlord Games. You may not recognize that name nearly as much as some of the other companies I've talked about. You may, however, recognize a few of their more notable titles. Village Attacks, the reverse sort of dungeon crawl, playing as the monsters in a miniature-driven style game. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Also, Everrain, finally delivered about 2 years or so late, 2+ years, maybe even 3. I forget what it is nowadays. But they just recently announced their crowdfunding campaign. I believe it was sported through GameFound, maybe originally even on Kickstarter, and ported over for backer kit purposes over there. 1 to 5 player co-op castle defense, Monsters and Mortals, Chinese themed expansion with this one being Grim Dynasty, folds. The whole company is folding, and the $350,000 or so that was raised during that campaign is gone. At least with Mythic, you're being blackmailed, right? Pay us extra and maybe you'll get something. This one, nope, sorry, you're just gone. Right? Like, okay. So, another one bites the dust, cue that music. I don't know what to tell you. But I guess the big lesson, the big commonality between almost all of these folks, miniatures. Ride by the sword, die by the sword, right? It's where the cost comes in. It's where the overhead comes in. Molds aren't cheap. Production ain't cheap. Transportation of those ain't cheap. It's just gone up. So, not to say that the risk of miniature-driven games is terribly high, right? Like, it's still going to be like single-digit percentage points at best. But I guarantee, comparatively, the relative risk, if you're going back to your statistics or your epidemiology backgrounds, if you will, the relative risk of failure from a miniatures game campaign, I would say, is several times higher, significantly higher, than non-miniature ones. Does that surprise you? No, it shouldn't. I think the overhead is going to be more. I think the risk of production or delays or issues from a cost standpoint are going to be more. And so the risk of not having enough, especially as companies are small, even with these hundreds of $1,000s raised, the margins are thin, folks. Now, it just sucks. Is this going to be one of those that, somebody picks up eventually? Is it going to be one of those where one of the other big guys picks it up and produces them, or picks them up and produces them at a discounted rate with a new crowdfunding campaign? I have no idea. But the statement on the page over on GameFound, I think this was actually on Kickstarter in the first place, they are literally, it's 3 lines. With heavy hearts, we come to you today with the deeply sad news that we come to the end of the line. After 8 years of making games, Grimlord Games is entering insolvency and immediately ceasing all activities. That's how it goes. Boom. Mic drop. You been burned yet? I got burned. Wasn't by a game. Got burned by a set of dice. Guy took 50,000. Never seen him. Posted on Instagram, I think once like a year ago or so, but have you gotten burned yet? Because, you know, few and far between, like I mentioned, but we're seeing more of it. So, a few other quick things of note before we get to the end, because we can't end on a poor note like that. Stonespine Architects, the latest from Thunderworks Games, from the designer of Cartographers, a similar sort of boss monster-esque build your own dungeon, make it as most dangerous as you can for heroes, is coming to crowdfunding as one of Thunderworks' next games, I'm assuming, on July 11. Now, slightly role player adjacent, not sure if it's fully tied in, but we'll see. The aesthetic is interesting, but it gives me more of a boss monster vibe, so I need more depth of gameplay than that because boss monster, no thank you. Next up, also, we have launching in June. I covered this one previously when they announced it. Through BackerKit, we're getting a new version of Innovation. Innovation Ultimate, the 13th edition. No. The issue is it's not compatible. They're not going to offer an upgrade. So if you have any of the old versions of it, you're just going to have to buy this one. And as someone who bought recently, like 4 months ago, one of the previous Deluxe Master Edition, whatever it was called, I don't know. And if you read the comment section on this game in the first place, like, you don't even need half the expansions because you're never going to play them enough in the first place, because you can play the base game as, you know, quoted elsewhere, 100 plus times and still be happy with it and not get to most of the cards in the expansion. So do you need this? Is it going to work? Yeah. Is it out of print some places and some of that stuff? Sure. Are they offering a little bit of new stuff and a little bit of balance, and they're actually addressing some errata? And should you have errata still at this point in this stage, in this edition of this game? No, but we'll kind of see where it goes from that aspect, I guess. So that's kind of okay. And, here we go. Heat is finally going to be restocked in the end of May in the US. So if you're looking for Heat, pedal to the metal. I know I screwed that up on my top 10 list, but that was number 5 on my top 10 list, right? 5, 6, somewhere in there. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely fantastic game. Just, things will shake out eventually. But I'll tell you, it's not going anywhere. It's a freaking awesome game. It's well worth your money for the content that you get. I mean, it's an absolute smashing success from all ways, shapes, and forms, especially as someone who has no interest in that style of racing game in the first place. It hooked me, and hooked me hard. Last up, Ark Nova Marine Worlds. Well, the expansion pre-order just went live on Capstone. And so they're shooting for some time around Essen later this year. Plus or minus, take your pick, of around October. Now, it's only on Capstone. Do you want to get it on Capstone? It's guaranteed going to be higher on Capstone. Guaranteed you're going to be one of the first people to get it. How important is that to you? Have you played through the other map pack? Have you played through the base game enough? I haven't. Just makes me sigh regret because I haven't gotten that to the table enough as well. My wife comes up to me tonight and she goes, "Hey, do you have any games we could play together tonight?" And I'm like thinking through the things I need to get played more of. Dwellings of Elderville, Ark Nova, Endless Winter. Like, well, honey, I don't think so. None of those. So I taught her Summoner Wars 2nd edition instead. So there you go. That's it. News, roundup, and everything else in between. Let me know what you think. Thoughts, everything else. Crowdfunding this week. Massive tons of stuff on my side of things as well, too. Take it for what you will. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully see you around. Stay classy. Roll Liege. Peace out.